Welcome everybody. This is another episode of Double Exposure that I'm very happy to be doing in collaboration with GPP. My name is Mikey Mhenna, and this is a special edition. As you know, Double Exposure is all about having two photographers be together in conversation. I'll pass it over to Somjit to talk about the series and about GPP.
Thank you, Mikey. Welcome, everyone, and exciting to have the third Double Exposure. And I really kind of, for me, this is like having friends over and kind of introducing two photographers to them and kind of having a conversation about their work, and not a deep dive into the work, but rather, understanding the approaches and what they're endeavoring to do, and it's going to be informal and a chat, and we'll get to know Sama and Hazem better. But before we start, let me tell you a bit about Gulf Photo Plus. Even though we're based in Dubai in Al Sirkal Avenue, we are our footprint extends to the rest of the Gulf, but also the rest of the Arab world, and increasingly also to Africa and South Asia, and especially because Dubai is the UAE's is such a host to communities from these areas. We host workshops, we host exhibitions. We have an exhibition right now, a group show from Bangladesh. We have an artist talk tomorrow with an Egyptian artist called Roger Ani, for example, who is here from Egypt. We have a lot of photo books from artists about the Arab world and by Arab photographers. And we're always busy. We're always doing cool things. So check us out. We also, this was from Tanya and Tasneem's talk, but you're welcome to browse our collection of images that you can buy, and instead of getting generic stuff from IKEA, support artists from the region. So check out gulfphotoplus.com editions, and follow us. And if you are sharing us online, please tag Afikra and Gulf Photo Plus, and of course Sama and Hazem, who are going to spend their evening with us tonight. And that brings us to these amazing artists. I am in awe of both of them and their work. Sama I've known for a while. Sama graciously accepted an invitation to show one of her bodies of work at Breda Photo Festival, of which I'm a curator. Hazem is my neighbor, literally down the road at Al Sirkal Avenue, and his gallery and his studio is here. He prints with us at Gulf Photo Plus, and again, he's also been very supportive of young photographers in Gaza. So pleasure to have them both. And what I want to do is start out by introducing them, but I'm really trying to avoid the kind of stock bios that you get on the artist websites, because as detailed as they are, I think sometimes they kind of miss the point. So I'm going to actually ask Hazem to start introducing Sama, and I will fill in the blanks, and then vice versa. So Hazem, do you want to start and tell us about Sama Alshaibi?
I need to apologize first. I am in the middle of the art fair, and actually I'm since like almost 1 year working in my crazy solo show in Sharjah, and from the solo show till the art fair, the commission art piece. So actually I haven't stopped even for 1 day. So I'm really a bit exhausting, but I'm so excited and happy to be with you tonight. And I'm really sorry about the cows behind me around here, because there is no actually space to go to hide myself. Yeah, how I can start about Sama? I think Sama, first of all, we are really very, very close friends, even we haven't met like so much time. But I think there's a kind of like soul that connects me and Sama. And the other connection that belong to our history as Palestinian roots, and a connection between our concepts in our work. So I'm not really very good to speak very well about Sama. I think, but I will try my best to analyze a bit about her work. What really attracted me about Sama work is the sort of the investigation about the history, which is I'm really very interested in. If you here are common with my work, how she re-proposed the history from a different perspective, not from just a nostalgic perspective, but with a new kind of propose the story. And I think Sama, for me, one of the most like interesting Arab woman. And yeah, so I can just so far say this about Sama. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Hazem. Sama, your
I
turn
hope I
to
was
introduce Hazem, and then I will fill in the blanks.
First of all, hello everybody. It's so great to be with all of you and to see Mohammed, Mikey, and Hazem again. It's just really a wonderful pleasure. Hazem, okay, I completely agree. Even though we don't see each other that often, we live on different parts of the planet. When we do see each other, it's so much fun. We can't stop hanging out and talking and laughing. And he's extraordinary. And I think that like, I probably got to know his work before he got to know my work. I got to see his show at one of the private museums in Silsila, that's how you say it,
Silsila Private Museum.
Yeah. And I'd seen like maybe individual pieces before, but that was a solo show and it blew me away. I felt like he was doing something, again, I was very interested in, but also just really different from a lot of the Palestinian and Arab artists that I've seen. He had his own unique voice, his own way of interrogating history, interrogating identity, interrogating what an image does. I've always troubled the idea of photography as well. I'm obsessed with photography and at the same time reject it. And I think you can find that question in my work, and I found that in his as well. But he's just also really fun to hang out with. We saw each other at the Cairo Biennial, and I think we hung out every single day, all day. And one of the things I really love about Hazem is like, he just approaches life with such joy. If you ever have an art fair or a Biennale or whatever, a lot of artists are too busy to do the regular stuff, the everyday stuff, or they're very, very busy just being important, doing all the networking and everything, or maybe just stayed up very late the night before. Hazem and I were always up every morning to go on all of the tours that nobody else would do besides us. And what I really loved is that he speaks 10,000 languages. So poor guy was having to interpret for everyone, because this is a Biennale, right? There's people from Sweden, from Italy, from France, from South Africa, from Spain, and he was going from Arabic, Spanish, Italian, English, French. And I tried just the Arabic and English part for him just to help him. And he never got upset. It was 110 degrees every day. He never gets upset. He smiles, he does it, he cares. And I love that joy and just enthusiasm for the people, the very normal people around you. So that's my introduction of Hazem.
Okay, and I'll just fill in some bits here. So Sama is a very, very accomplished artist, also a professor and co-chair of photography and video and visual art, I guess, at the University of Arizona in Tucson. Has published a monograph with Aperture, has exhibited in multiple places, and most recently is a recipient of a fellowship, which we'll come back to in a second. Hazem was born in Gaza, spent most of his youth there, and then moved to Rome, and then he's been spending time in the UAE. and we'll get to their work in a bit, but they obviously have commonalities in the fact that Hazem is from Palestine. Sama's mother, correct, is from Palestine, and is half Iraqi. And I think we should also mention today our sadness in the news of the passing of Latif Al-Ani, who passed away, a pioneer of photographic work in Iraq. And so good excuse for everyone to go check out his work and his legacy. So let's get started by, I thought what we would do is start out by, I'm going to ask Sama to talk about Silsila. And the reason I'm asking her to talk about this particular project is because that's how I know Sama's work from, having seen it at Ayam. And, I feel that Sama's work, if somebody were to ask ask someone to identify our work, Silsila kind of always comes up, and it sort of is an embodiment of the work that Sama does, and has kind of extended over time. In most recently, I think it was a part of the Maldives Pavilion, correct, or parts of it were. So maybe we'll start with this, Sama, and if you can tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, sure. So Silsila, for those, if there's any non-Arabic speakers here, means link, or chain link in Arabic. And I started this really long time ago. This is my longest project, probably took 8 years. I sort of forced myself to stop making this work at some point, because I felt like I would never, it would never end. I originally started the project, well, I'll just say very basically that it deals with the ecological crisis that the Middle East and North Africa is facing with the end of fresh water. But I didn't really start off that way as a project. I mean, and I think there's a lot of things that this project embodies, which is a big part of it is identity, and not thinking of identity being one that is like of a specific culture, nation, or religion, but the land itself, and thinking of the desert being something that that people across the Middle East and North Africa really share. We are all surrounded or live on deserts. And at a time that I was making a lot of projects about fractures or the aftermath of war, or really kind of traumatic, devastating, ongoing, forever wars in the Middle East. A lot of them contrived or started or supported by the West, where I live. I wanted to do something a little bit different about our commonality, about shared values, about who we were as something way before and older and more essential than these very, very kind of in-your-face mediated, contemporary moments of trauma. And I do what I always do when I don't know what to do, which is I go for walks and I go into natural spaces, and I try to be present there. Instead of like picking up a newspaper, I go to the land to ask questions and be myself there, and try to sort of, just kind of connect back to myself. And I just started photographing and making videos. I think the first 2 years, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just moving across different natural landscapes in North Africa. I think was where I started, maybe in Egypt, and then like to Palestine and Tunisia. And I was also looking at texts that were pre-colonial texts. I wanted to find more, older texts that didn't, when you do so much work from a colonial framework or a post-colonial framework, sometimes it gets very exhausting, because again, all the fissures and interruptions becomes the center. And I was trying to decenter that and try to find something more, the way, when you live in the West like me, I live in the United States, it's like, it's trying to find something very deep, but not nostalgic about who I am, right? Something very, very pulls myself. Why do I always have this very strong sense of identity from being from that region if I left so long ago and I really come there as a visitor? Like, what is that part? It's inside of me. Is it something, some longing? Is it some fissure, something, some interruption? But I really felt there was something really much more beautiful and soulful than that. And so, I started reading Al-Rihla from Ibn Battuta, who's also very, it's interesting because he's considered like the grandfather or the originator of the travel log. And coming from a photography background, the ideas of a travel log is the ways in which photography kind of has a problem, originates and going into other places and making these kinds of images that can other cultures. I know that double other doesn't seem to work in English, but I don't have another way of saying it right now. But yeah, so I started to go. He was a very good. He documented where he was going very well, and it gave me parameters. But I also thought of the idea of journey and migration and movement in the way that sand and water travels, and that it respects no boundaries, no artificial lines drawn by colonialists or current contemporary conditions, and that you can move, and that it's a sort of freedom in that space. So it held these kind of two spaces for me. One was a very natural kind of inclination to find a shared common identity, thinking about what we have together, which is the land. And also at the same time, because of everywhere I was going, getting off grid, going out of the cities, meeting people in small communities, villages, oases, and seeing the very kind of difficulties that they were facing with the end of fresh water, the climate issues, the droughts that they were experiencing, the poverty, which is just really increased and exasperated by war and conflict. These kind of got held together in the same space. And that really became the project that took me to 23 countries over 8 years. Not 8 solid years of working, but most of my breaks, all the summers, all the winter breaks, every time I could get out to go to it. That's Silsila, and that became photos and videos. And it did premiere at the Maldives Pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2013, but I still kept on the project till 2018. And, so every exhibition I had, I showed new work, I added to it, I tinkered with the videos. It felt like it was a moving, growing, responsive project to the spaces and conversations that I was in.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible body of work, and every photography, fine art student should be studying this, and documentary photographer. I think it's ambitious, but if you have done such a great job in kind of tackling a lot of the interconnectedness of like land and environment and identity and post-colonial narratives, and I think it's something that should be in every curriculum. Very briefly,
can I ask a question about that?
Yeah,
just
sure.
real quick.
Sure.
I'm always curious about long-term projects, how creators of that project look back at some of the earlier incarnations or the earlier sort of output. Do you ever cringe at this stuff? Do you ever go like, I never would have taken it that way? Ugh. Like, or you tickled? Do you ever rediscover some of the earlier parts of a project and like, oh yeah, I forgot about this part?
I think I'm very self-critical, so I cringe at almost everything I make, whether it was long ago or yesterday. But at the same time, I try to respect my former self and what I was thinking about. But the really powerful thing about Silsila, which is for me as an artist or as a person, is that I didn't share it with anybody for 4 years. And you have to know, as for someone who's a contemporary artist that's exhibiting all the time, who had gallerists or like, what else are you making? What's new? I hid this. I had all these projects I was doing. And so that's what everybody saw. That was at the art fairs or Paris Photo, whatever I was showing different things. I was afraid of Silsila because I thought it was too pretty, and that the beauty would become, I didn't know if it had enough tension for the contemporary art field. And the way that you're put in a box as an artist, especially as an Arab artist, I was afraid that it was too soft, and I was afraid that also Western audiences like romanticizing the landscape, because there was this really complicated narrative to it, but it needed time and it needed to like grow. So I was making work for almost like 3 to 4 years without editing. I mean, just shooting. I had hard drives upon hard drives upon hard drives. And thank God for the Venice Biennale, because that and the monograph with Aperture, because it forced me to deal with the archive and the material, because I was getting out of hand. And if you don't stop and look at your work, you really don't actually start to make those connections about really the practice of it still makes sense. But what's there, what actually is outcome, is something it needs a little time and reflection and looking. And it was a bit of a monster. And thank God I had a sabbatical from teaching, because I finally I had space to look at it. And I'm very deadline oriented. So thankfully, having a really, really big show like Venice forced me to work with the videos, but the photographic stuff really was because of aperture. I mean, the editor, the publisher was just like, they wanted to make a book about all my work, but they're like, yeah, whatever you're working on now too, can we see that? And I don't know, this is a kind of a personal story, but I don't mind sharing it because we're all amongst friends. But yeah, I was going through breast cancer at that time. I was very sick. I was very ill. I was stuck at home. So I just started printing everything. I printed out hundreds and hundreds of images, and Aperture came and they looked at this and they said, why would we do a project of previous collections of work? You have a enormous body of work here. And so, yes, sometimes making a book or having a big show like that can help you frame what you're doing, right? And it gave me guidance later. The later works were much more directed because I really knew it, and I knew how to fill the holes and the gaps. I knew what other parts of it that I hadn't really unpacked, but I really liked that I responded so organically and intuitively in the beginning. I was just responding to the places I was in and kind of without a compass, you know, as it were, working, you know, and yeah, but yeah, cringing, I think I always do that. It's always hard when you actually see your work like this and you're like,
yeah. Well, I think there's more to this. I'm going to let us move on, let somebody keep on going. I may have more questions about it towards the end.
Fast forward and very briefly, Sama, just tell us about this. Like, I think this is one of your later projects. Like, I think it's just before COVID, correct?
Yeah, this was made at Art Pace, which is an extraordinary residency here in
San Antonio,
Texas, in San Antonio. Yeah. And, you know, great budget, 2 months, help, like, you know, here's a space. And I had a gallery show too that was in one of my in my studio that converts into a gallery. But I also asked if I could have the roof, because I love the idea of a rooftop. Being Iraqi, it's like my last memories of before the war, the Iraq-Iran war. My most favorite memories was being with my family. In Iraq, it's so hot, we have no air conditioning. We all slept on the roofs as big families. And there was like the palm trees and, like, you know, being their cousins, trying not to sleep at night, counting the shooting stars. And it's one of those like romantic images before war. And rooftop was a very interesting liminal space of like a threshold space of public and also private. It's a home, but everybody could see it. So looking at this rooftop that I saw downtown San Antonio that you could see from anywhere, but you can only access very privately through an elevator, I kind of thought about this neon thing, you know, like neon being like signage, like the language of public space, right? Like where you have neons telling you to come in here, or this is a store. And at that time I was really reflecting on the disappearance of women from public life in Iraq, right? The generation that my mom was a part of protest, part of government, part of teaching, just, you know, very, normal experience, but how that's really regressed. And I've done projects about this in photographic terms about the conflation of like exporting democracy and women's rights with actually, you know, war and justification for US military intervention and oil extraction. And I've done that in a photographic term, but it didn't feel appropriate to use the female body, which often I use my body as a site or like a protagonist. It didn't feel appropriate, like, because this really is the disappearance of women. And so I sort of had a dilemma. I mean, I'm not even in Iraq to talk about women without photo. Like, I'm not a documentary photographer either. I don't go photograph a space and say, oh, it's absent women. Look, it's a male space. I mean, it wouldn't even, I know as a photographer and as a professor of photography, those two things don't equal. Okay, that's just a photograph of somebody, of a landscape or of an urban center. And so I needed some mechanism to talk about the memory of it or the signage of it, but actually not being it. And I used the outline figure of a very famous public sculpture in Iraq. It's a water fountain in a traffic circle in Baghdad. Also had a lot of memories associated with it. I know the artist who had made it before he had passed. So I used that very famous outline of that figure, but everything's displaced. The water is now in a separate like piece coming out, and all of the vessels that are there have words carved into it that comes from, I extracted from assassination lists. When after the United States invaded Iraq, there was this massive assassination of Iraqis, both men and women, who were professors, deans, like really like the intelligence class. And as an academic, like that really kind of resonated, that this assassination of cultural memory and of like Iraq's identity was happening. If you kill the teachers, you kill a future, right? You get rid of the ability to teach and understand and know yourself. So I just took words and extracted them. And so it breaks up the narrative. Like there is no one story. There's no one woman here. It becomes all fragmented. But if you stand back far enough, you can kind of tell the story. And I don't do installation that often, but when I do it, it often has the absence of the body and considerations of like, what is this aftermath of war or, you know, trauma of some kind. And I think this is actually informing my new work. I'm going to Iraq this December. I had the fellowship that you talked about is the Guggenheim Fellowship. And this is my new work, which is dealing with the absence of the body in Iraq.
Okay, well, make sure you pass by Dubai on the way. Hazem, can we see you and get your audio back on? So Hazem, I want to talk to you about how I know your work and the work that I feel like if I was to kind of pick one image that like for me embodies, you know, your work, and I know, you know, you have a vast, you know, prolific producer work, but this is kind of your collage work is something that I would always, if I had to introduce you at a party, I'd say Hazem, you know, he does a lot of work in collage. So maybe start out by talking about Map of Land and, you know, the work that really kind of put you on a map, excuse the pun.
Yeah. I don't know, most of the people, they are not maybe common with my previous work like 10 years ago, because I come from painting background, especially a figurative background. So just to connect this background with what I'm doing right now with collage as a painter. This series, Map of Land from 2019, are from my own private collection from 18th century. They are hand color photography, actually. The Map of Land, it's a four work. It's a series of four pieces. As an artist and as a Palestinian artist, I can't escape also from what's happening in Palestine, situation right there. So this series, Map of Land, belong to the demolition of hundreds of Palestinian olives terrain, and especially in the West Bank. What once shocked me really as a human being, and then as an artist, not just as a Palestinian, but as a human being and as an artist. The demolition of hundreds of olive trees, and we are talking about very old olive tree. We talk about like from 100 to 100 to 2000 years old olive tree. Once a friend of mine, he sent me an image of how we call it, the trunk of the tree, the trunk of the tree, with the hand stamp, the handprint, stamp. He sent me a couple of photos, and then I did my own research about the way how they cut actually the olive tree in a very, very miserable and aggressive way. So I feel that this the age of this olive tree are printed actually inside this trunk, how we call it. I mean the
It's trunk. You're right. It's the trunk
a trunk.
of the
Yes,
tree.
yes,
Trunk.
yes. Please help me, Sama. Please, Sama. Yeah, yeah. I felt that I'm looking into 100 of like fingerprints into this trees. So and then after months, I have asked my friend, he's a photographer in the West Bank, to photograph actually 100 of this trunk olive tree, and then and then I did a sort of scanning of this trunk. And what we are seeing right here, they are the original. I mean, let's call it like fingerprint of this tree, and they are the real cut of that. I mean, of this like caterpillar machine. Exactly. So this was the concept, and why I use it in this, especially in this series of this archival photography, because the landscape in that area, exactly in the Olives Mount, Jabal al-Zaytun in Jerusalem, is actually in a massive change. Like, yani, there is a sort of like absence, like every week, every 2 weeks, absence of something there, something important in that landscape. So for me, was a kind of like a film with like hundreds of scenario in the same hours. I don't know if how I can explain. I mean, in a very intense change, due of course to the diminution of the houses, or to the, especially to the agriculture land in that area. And as Sama, she said that's why we have really like a common things between me and her. What I'm trying not really to use the archive from a nostalgic aspect. This is what I'm trying. You know, some people, of course, we can't at all escape from nostalgia at all. We can't escape it, like we can escape 100% from the nostalgia. Of course, I left Palestine like almost 20 years ago. I have this sort of maybe a different kind of nostalgia looking to Palestine, or seeing Palestine from a different perspective from outside. And seeing Palestine like from Italy, or seeing Palestine from Dubai, it's completely, for me, a different perspective. So that's why I repropose this archive from a different perspective, and to put the archive into the time, into today, and to make this dialogue between the past, either the nice past, or the beautiful, or the glamour Palestine, with the contrast of what is Palestine look like today. Yeah.
No, thank you. And again, I'm going to fast forward to your latest exhibition. And again, thank you, Hazem, for making time, because I know you have a commission right now at Abu Dhabi Art. You have a commission in the desert. You have a show at Maraya Art, which you've been working on for a while. And we know that because we've helped you with some of the printing. But this is a fascinating exhibition, which I'm hoping to get to next week. But yeah, tell us about this work that is on show at Maraya, which is called Temporary Museum.
Yeah, temporary museum is متحف مؤقت for Palestine. Actually, this show was for me a dream, and the dream has happened today. To build actually a real museum for Palestine, but outside Palestine, not inside Palestine. We already have few museums, but a museum that has a global context, which is I'm trying to do. And then I proposed this temporary museum. The proposal was to create a standard museum, aesthetically, I mean, a museum. I have my own private collection, and I collect photography, I collect books, maps, since almost 10 years. Some of them are really very important documents. Like I have some books from 18th century. I have some important original maps. I have books. I have some original photography. I have real flowers from Palestine. Impressed flower, old, like 150 years old. So was the curator of the show, Sima Azam. She's a fantastic curator. She's originally Palestinian by chance, yani. This show, I have 5 bodies of work from the society, till the economical life in Palestine, how it used to be until today, and then a piece called Stereoscope of Palestine, where you can experience Palestine in a different, in a 3-dimension way. And then there is a museum and used to be called the Archaeological Museum in Palestine, in Jerusalem, which is completely now, the name has been completely changed. Was supposed to be inside this museum the history of the family and our own legacy, etc. Since almost 10 years, I'm trying to connect with many Palestinian families from all over the world. Some of them, they donate to me their own private collection. Even some of them that they donate their own intimate photography, like wedding party or like children photography, etc. We see here the blueprint of a temporary museum, the blueprint that this is drawing on the wall. If we zoom in, and that's unfortunately we can't zoom in here, there is a small box, a plexiglass box, where I saved this photography of this family inside that. So actually, I'm proposing to this museum, I'm proposing this, the memory, the collective, and the individual and collective memory of this family into that temporary museum. The sculpture in the middle is a stereoscope for Palestine with 48 photography from 1890 with a stereoscope. Also, I bought it from an auction from the state, where you can experience the landscape, the absence of the landscape in a 3-dimension way. I wish one day, if someone will be around, if you in Sharjah or in Dubai, to visit it and to experience the 3-dimension view of that. And a series called Blood and Oil, which is I've been inspired by a man who was sitting behind his cottage tree in Ramallah, close to Ramallah, in a small village, and he said in an interview that instead of we have the happiness today of collective the olives from this tree, our blood is mixed today with the oil. So I create a series that's called Blood and Oil. Yes, I'm really sorry, guys, that I'm a bit tired.
That's
but
okay.
I'm trying my best, yeah. Please apologize for that.
No, not
You're
at
doing
all.
great. What's wrong with you?
No.
You're amazing.
Sama,
That's you're tired, man. I was just thinking, man, I wish I could hire Hazem to come teach with me at University of Arizona.
Okay, so Sama, I actually wanted to ask a question about this, right? So you hearing Hazem talk about his work, I'm always interested in sort of communities of artists who know each other. And just to pull back the curtain a little bit, the reason why this event is happening is because you, by name, said, I really want Hazem to be on this panel with me. So as he's sort of walking through his work, what's sort of going through your head? What are you learning about sort of his work or his thinking that is new, that sort of reveals or unveils something that you didn't know beforehand?
Well, I mean, I think for me, so I haven't seen the new show, right? I haven't been to Mariah. This is really new. He just opened this in September. And I've just seen a few images. So I haven't had an opportunity to be with it. I actually have had the great luck of actually seeing a lot of his work in real life, and not just his work, but like the way he installs it, the way he puts things together, having the great opportunity to walk with him. He's a very generous person. Like he will come and talk about his work. It's just like a lot of artists are just like, yeah, it's there. I really, look, there we go. Is that your new book?
No, this is the new book. This is the Blood and Oil series.
I see. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's, there's a lot of artists that can make work, and they talk through their work, and that's the best they can. I mean, that's like the best they can do. That's the way they operate as an artist. But I've always found Hazem to be, his like stories, his intentions, the way he talks about the work, the backstories are as interesting. They're like a side card to the work, and so it's I'm like not necessarily discovering new things, because I've heard him talk about different projects, but yeah, his backgrounds are super interesting. Sometimes I don't want to meet the artist, because when they talk about the work, it's disappointing. Like I saw more into their work than they saw into it. I'm like, can I actually just analyze your work for you? I know that sounds pretentious, but like, but it's, I mean, you idolize artists sometimes, or anyway, like whatever, and then they're just a human being, and like it might not, they can do something very brilliant with their hands and stuff, but they may be not able to articulate. But Hazem's like one of those people that can really speak to his work, and his intentions and the backstories are just as interesting as the work too. So I really love this idea of also like proposing to a temporary, what he said, the museum for the outside from a global context too. I think that's really important. It's like, I'm very interested in what, we talk a lot as Arab artists or artists from the Middle East and North Africa, like this idea of authenticity comes up a lot, and how there's this Arabic, like how Arab are you competition, which kind of got referenced. And I've been saying this in my last few talks, that I really categorically reject that. Like people trying to figure out how long I've been in the Middle East, or how connected, or how much are my roots, or how much percentage or whatever. And I've always talked about a lens of migration. Like that's really, I work through that lens of migration, of diaspora, of displacement, but not in the, again, nostalgic way. And I've been saying these in my talks lately, that in the 21st century, is there nothing more Arab than being displaced? I mean, it is an identity of being Arab. And to talk about a museum that's on that context, right? Like for that outside, like we have the work inside, but then we have another context on the outside, and it operates in a different way. And it's also valid in a different way. So I was just sort of mulling that in my head while he was talking.
You both alluded at some point to this idea of like the responsibility you bear being Palestinian or part Palestinian. And, that can be quite a burden, right? Quite a responsibility. And I want to talk to you, especially in the events of the last year, like how have you felt about, when you're talking about the work, or when you're thinking about new work to make, what are some of the things that you're conscious of, especially to do with Palestine? I mean, Hazem, of course, is very much involved in it, especially with the last show. But Sama, maybe what do you think of, especially with, your work going forward? I know you're going to Iraq, but you have a lot of work around Palestine, like Afish, for example, or the Galilee project, the screenshots that I've seen, and many others. But tell me more about, especially in the context of what's happened in the last year, how fraught that process can be. Well,
what happened in the last year happens every year. It happens every day. We live that reality all the time, that onslaught, that murder, that demolition, whether it's the olive trees, or it's human beings, or buildings, or societies, or rights. It's just like, you have to live and work this every single day. And so there's no separation, but there was a difference this year for me. I think in particular, because again, I live in the United States and I live in a context that people know so little about Palestine, and it's so fraught, right? What they know. And so it's a lot of it is either ignorance or complete propaganda that they've been fed from a different voice. And so you're challenging that constantly. And it's a really, interesting point, because you have Ifish up there with generation after generation, literally generation after generation. I mean, my mother was raised with these traumatic narratives. I mean, she was born in Palestine. She was displaced in 1948. She was raised in Iraq. Her family, Palestinians never cease to be Palestinians. They raise their children and they live it and they embody it. And it's always this like experience of living that dispossession, right? And you're always connected to it. It's not like a one fissure that happened in history in 1948 and then everyone's just coming to grips with the aftermath. It's like ongoing challenge and removal. And so, but this particular last year was interesting in a bad way, but also interesting in a good way, that it happened on the heels of the George Floyd Black Lives movement. And so progressives and just ordinary citizens in the United States, really, I would say worldwide, but I live in the United States, so it's my context. We're all sitting at home because of COVID. So everybody's online, everybody's paying attention, and alternative narratives are coming forward. And for the first time, it's like, you're really challenging the authority. You're really challenging what people perceive. And the real question came to be, it's like, what is wrong with progressives in America? Like, how come they are for every disenfranchised, marginalized, minoritized, group in the world, but Palestinians? Like, why? And so this really became the first time that you would hear people saying, I'm scared to talk about this. I've always been frightened. I don't know what to think. I'm afraid if I say something, now I'm an anti-Semitic. Now I'm like a Holocaust denier. It's like the weird conflations that people have because they've been fed this pathetic narrative and they can't see truly into that history. And that image history is such a problem. It's always been a problem, right? When it comes to the West, they see it through a very particular lens, and it's framed by both the right and the left in a very specific way. And this was the first time through social media, because of it was on the heels of the Black Lives movement and everything that is being challenged, and like giving voice to groups to have their own ability to tell their story. For the first time, you would see in the New York Times and Washington Post putting out, I mean, trust me, they had enough propaganda essays out there, but there was also space for Middle Eastern and Palestinian writers and experiences to be part of it. So it is definitely impacting my work. I say everything I want to say whenever I say it. I've always just taken that position. If I lose my job, if I'm challenged, that's my struggle and whatever. I've somehow been very lucky. University of Arizona is like one of the few Palestinian professors that has been very politically out there about Palestinian rights and narratives, and that I haven't gotten harmed yet. So far, there's been a few challenges to my jobs, but mostly my university has stood up and actually said, she is an expert in this field. She has the right to talk about it. I'm afforded my First Amendment rights where most Palestinian scholars are not in the United States. But this was the first time that like everybody could do it. And suddenly you didn't have to have the protection of a tenure track job, a tenured job. You could actually talk about it and not feel like you were going to be branded a terrorist, or you were going to lose your job, or you were going to be called an anti-Semite, or all these things. And so it was a crack in the ceiling that happened that I had never seen before. And so I've been publishing and writing and posting all throughout that, the bombardment of Gaza again, everything that was happening in, historical Palestine, in Akka, in Haifa, in Jaffa. I mean, all those places, and where Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship were also speaking out for the first time, or actually getting listened to for the first time is probably the better way of saying it. It was a really kind of powerful moment, but it's a moment still seeped in tragedy. it's still a moment steeped in difficulty. You can't just be like, oh, it's all going to change overnight. I mean, what we're up against is extraordinary. But it was a crack. There was a fissure in the ceiling, and that's what I appreciated about it.
So Somji, how about you do one more question from your side, and then we'll do one question from the chat, and then.
Well, let's get to the chat one just in case we miss we lose Hazem. So the question is, would love to know who Sama and Hazem imagined audiences. I realized in my own practice I was guilty of unconsciously making work for mainly white and Western audiences. I live in the UK, in parentheses. So Hazem, maybe respond to Shaista's question about who do you think your audience is, and do you think about that when making work or talking about it?
I'm sorry. Okay. When I'm doing my art, I don't think about specific audience. I'm doing arts, and I think, I don't know if I did or not, but I feel that I'm doing, I'm trying to do my art in a global context. I didn't think actually about like this art or this piece of work is going to be understandable from like the Arab or the European or American, etc. I'm trying my best is to use a global context or a global language into my work. But I have never really thought about if this work has a certain language, for example, for European or for a Palestinian or for the Arab, etc. So I will tell you a very short story, but inshallah, my better it will be on. Once I had a solo show in Copenhagen. Power does not defend memory. القوة لا تهزم الذاكرة in Arabic. A very old lady, I think maybe she was like almost like 80 something. She was like not crying, but she was like, she had like some, how we can call it, like no, actually she was a bit crying. It was for me like a shock. She made me a bit worried actually. She made me worried actually. Sorry guys, I'm trying to skip from place.
We're getting a live look at what happens at an art fair in Abu Dhabi.
No, yeah, I can't wait to finish this this Zoom, and then I have to go back to my hotel and to die actually, and then back to my work, to my studio tomorrow. The only place where I can find myself and relax. Anyway, so I have asked that lady, sorry, the gallerist of Copenhagen, please can I talk to that lady? And I need to understand why she's like, for me, like shocked, why she's crying in front of one of my work. It's just about, it's a landscape with the trees about Tiberia, Tabaria, and with a very small work, installation work on that photography. She answered that lady that I have been to that place in my life, exactly this place. I have asked her, have you been to Palestine before? She said, no, I haven't been to Palestine. But then why you said that you have been to that place? She used to live close by Lago di Como in Italy. Some of you know this lago. And she had a photo exactly in the same landscape, like tree and some water and boats, but of course in black and white. And she had this very strong nostalgia in her way, of course. But what was interesting in this scene that I feel that it doesn't matter that my work can be belong to a Palestinian, the Palestinian people, or to Arab or to European. So for me, that's that day was for me like. I think it has changed something in my mind regarding the audience of my work. So I'm trying my best to put a global context. So the work can belong to anyone to the world. Doesn't matter that if you are a Palestinian or Arab or American or Egyptian or so. Yeah.
Thank you.
The crazy Hazem today. Yeah.
Sama, do you think about your imagined audience?
It's one of those questions I get in like grad school, and I usually like, I'm like, whoever's dealing with it is my audience, but there is some there are definitely some projects where I definitely know what I'm critiquing. And so, yeah, I don't need necessarily to say that it's only defined by this audience or that audience. You know, some conversations I've made in projects of mine, some of the things that I was grappling with, you know, has to do with an internal social mindset that we have maybe in the Middle East, or we have in a certain country or a context that maybe won't really make that much sense to somebody who's outside of it, that doesn't have that perspective. But I also, like Hazem, think about layering, or, you know, like thinking about a global context, because people come at your work from all spaces, and being in a place like the United States, it's so diverse here. You know, you can't really even see or understand how people will empathize or understand or question or have no understanding. But, you know, I'm aware that sometimes that different audiences will read it a very specific way. And so do you have some elements in there that you can be interruptive, or not allowed the work to be consumed so easily from what they think it's about, because they're on the inside track. So, but yeah, I really felt that story that Hazem just said, because I had that experience when I moved to Tucson, Arizona. I came out of the airport and I started crying. I felt like I was in Jericho, in El Rija. You know, I just felt like the land held a memory in a way that it looked so similar. And I've always experienced as artists, people come up to me and they're like, these stories of flight, these stories of disruption, dispossession. I mean, there's stories of my grandmother leaving Romania. People find these ways to empathize and have understanding. And I think it's interesting, because that's one of the reasons I love Hazem's work like so much. It's like it super locates Palestine, but it's also an imagined space. It's about a history. There's all these ways to enter it too, you know, and it doesn't just feel like it's regionally topical on a subject. I mean, I might even leave that out if I was describing his work by accident, because it takes on all these other issues of the archive, of the way memory behaves, of a history of this, you know, interruption of time. Palestine could be, you know, another place in his work, but it is completely in Palestine as well. I mean, we don't get beyond that, and it's also a love song to that as well, you know. But yeah, so I think about audience, but I don't make it. I know there's no satisfying any particular audience, so I don't let it worry me too much.
Guys, I need you to skip.
Okay, bye, Hazem.
Bye, Hazem.
Hazem, thank you very, very much for your
Thank you
time.
very much.
And
Thank you so
we'll
much.
see you in Dubai soon.
Thank you so much. مع السلامة. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sama, same to you. Thank you for you know, braving the time difference and making this happen. And yeah, can't wait to see you on the way to Iraq when you do your Guggenheim grant. Please stop by.
No, I'm definitely stopping by. Not in December. I'm going to come in February.
Okay,
So-
February's fine too.
Yeah. But it was, thank you so much for hosting us. And it was wonderful to have that conversation with the both of you.
And I'll just put up for people who are on here your Instagrams, and we were going to talk about Instagram, but and social media. But next time we can have a part 2 sometime. But
I think we should I think we should do a part 2 in GPP in
Okay, sounds
February.
great. Sounds great. We'll even get some techno music.
I'll DJ.
All right, everybody.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Ciao.